the relationship between the various ethnic nationalities did not drop from heaven. All that talk about Oduduwa coming with a chain from heaven is just mythology that we can all accept as the ways that illiterate culture, non-literate cultures explain migrations, explain a lot of things. In this particular case, those who came from Benin called themselves Igoromigodo, and their king was called King of the Sky. That is to say, the prince who came from Benin to Ife, they are normally called kings of the sky. But the last of the dynasty, the last male child of that dynasty, who was to have been killed, I mean, the story is fairly well known, Ekaladeran was the one who moved. And his job was to survive in a foreign land. That foreign land turned out to be Ife, where he politicked and managed to become a supreme leader amongst all the common people. They seized power. The seizure of power by that group is precisely what created the split between the Igbo Mokun peoples. That is to say, they were not just Ife. They had been Igbo Mokun. When they split, that is to say, those who were the dominant people in that society were driven away by another group that also became dominant. A civil war erupted. That civil war was what split the group so that you began to have a Yoruba and an Igbo. The truth is that they used to be one people. They now became different people. And in the later stages of the civil war, those who were the dominant group, those who won, those who became the dominant group, literally drove their siblings far away. The current Oba of Ilaje country, he talks about the Moremi story as if it is their own personal story. And in a lot of ways, he's right. But the truth is that when a migration of thousands, if not millions of people are on the move, they don't stay in one place at a time. I mean, they can stay in a place for even 20 years and then move. And the movement may be caused by famine, it may be caused by plagues, it may be caused by whatever. But once the movement began, the movement had to go on. It began, as I said, with a civil war complex where those on the western side were driving to the east. Those who were to be properly called Igbo. The movement was not a straight line movement because the many Igbo populations passed through Igala and other parts of what is now Lower Middle Belt before crossing to the other side. Very many Igbo are therefore siblings of all the peoples they met along the way. Any particular claim that the Igbo were a nationality straight from heaven is just talk. There is no Nigerian group that can make that claim in that sense, because if you take the Yoruba, for instance, the Yoruba were not the ones driven to the other side. They were the ones on this side of the Niger. And all of those on this side of the Niger made use of their mythology virtually the same way. Actually, when you look at the artwork that was being produced in the East, it was just a different version, an earlier version of the one. I mean, Igbo is one fine example. It was an earlier version of the artwork that was later being produced on the western side. The interaction with the Edo altered that pattern. Now, I am trying to make use of this dissociated kind of migrations, because a later historian would argue that in fact there are therefore no nationalities in Nigeria. That's a very blinkered argument. Blinkered because the building of commonality and then of communities by many of these groups that which led to the establishment of kingdoms and the rest of it, it was just the way it happens in every society in the world, that as people move from one place to the other, some band together, some split, in such a way that if you are talking about the Igala people spreading as far away as Luo in East Africa, you must not forget that the migrations from what is now southwestern, southeastern Nigeria also went. The history of African migration show that they went down south to southern Africa, and this is provable by simply looking at Zululand. The languages they speak in Zululand relate to West African languages, and it is generally well known by historians that those who moved south into southern Africa virtually committed a lot of genocide, because, well, it was as if they were going somewhere and some people were standing in the way. When you look at it from that angle, what we are studying by talking about nationalities is how people settled down. How people settled down. The settling down, for instance, of the Yoruba and the building of mythology that related to that of the Edo, it didn't come in one day. It came in a series of moves. Once, as I said, the Edo prince moved into Yoruba land, created this fissure that led to people migrating in various directions. They also forced others to move in various directions. Nobody was there to record it, but the ways in which they moved are being studied, which is why Ige Mokwede, who has done a lot of studies of Nigerian art and culture, argues that the Junkun populations are to be found in about 21 Nigerian states of the moment. If the current creation of states across most of Nigeria lasts for a long time, you will be amazed to find that some of the people will be differentiating themselves in the way that so many Nigerians who were probably one people at the beginning, that is to say, who were probably one people at the beginning, will now be regarding themselves as a different people altogether. Much of Nigerian history has taken that pattern.
But sir, how do we, what assessment or what actually history like assess the gentleman called Blood Regard in the formation of Nigeria? Was it a selfish move he made, or was it just trying to grapple with?
I'm coming to that. What the reason I've talked about how they mixed is to suggest that there was already a coming together in fairly anarchic, not direct, one-dimensional way before the British came. By the time the British came, they call it intertribal wars. They were not intertribal wars, they were slave wars. Slave wars imposed by Northern Africans and then by Europeans coming from the south. All of them trying to get a piece of the action. Many Africans were shipped via the Sahara into what is today called the Middle East. The vast black population that were so shipped intermixed with older black populations and new black populations and created a different coloration in the Middle East. So that although very many of the slaves had been wiped out by miscegenation, the relationship between them and Africans have been going in a seesaw fashion. Africans who moved to the Middle East and Middle Easterners who moved down to Africa recreate a new sense of being a people. I give you one example. The languages that we speak in Nigeria have forms that still exist in the Middle East. So that if you are talking about the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Efik, and very many of those languages, a group from the Middle East can actually be linked to the development of very many of these languages. However, one of the strange things about human society is that when they meet, those who share the same languages tend to gravitate towards one another, so that it is possible for different people to meet in a very anarchic situation, and suddenly, before you know what is happening, people who speak the same language are together. Now, this is how the story of the Middle Belt of Nigeria, for instance, can be looked at. There are up to about 136 different language groups and fractions in the Middle Belt. Some pushed by slavery, others pushed by religion, as I said, famine, and other environmental factors played their roles in how they moved. But in turning them into nationalities, creating kingdoms for them that act in a unitary fashion in relation to other groups, you have to take a very sensitive routing of migrations. Find out how these people move to this part and move to that part. The same Junkuns who fought battles right through from the Middle Belt up to Kano and Katsina did not completely get buried in those areas. Their languages are buried in the language that are spoken by the Hausa. The interesting part of that is that if you find a Hausa word in in the languages spoken in the Middle Belt, you will no longer regard it as a Hausa word. It's embedded in the languages that those people speak. When the British came, therefore, they took the biggest language groups, because it is not a case of in the Middle Belt there are 136 different language groups, and you are going to have to do. They did business with each of them, all right, but a conqueror brings together people so that he doesn't have to do business with each and every small fraction. So when they took over any part of Nigeria, they went to the biggest chunk. Like the Edo were well known, so you took the Edo. The Yoruba are well known as Ijebu. You took over the Ijebu, look for their king, and turn the king into your orderling. Wherever such conurbations could be found, the British first took them as individual units and then tried to bunch them together. Those whose languages appear to relate were treated as if they belonged to one language group. It turned out that it was not in all cases that they were right. When you bring the Edo and the Yoruba together, you are likely to get fractions like Ifon that you will say belong to both groups. Across Nigeria, there were always such groups. What the British did with them is interesting. As conquerors who wanted to dominate a people, they had to choose whom to put on top of the other. In some cases, they put one nationality over another and put some fraction, some tribe over another clan. Now, over time, those ones, no matter how different they were before, start resembling one another because they do things together. But Lugard worked out a strategy from the very beginning. He believed that to rule the whole of Nigeria, he needed to take over the groups that the Fulani had taken over. Because when the Fulani took over, they did not take over as a nationality. They took over as a religious body. But they insisted in their corporate organization on acting as if the Fulani, the corporatism of the Fulani was the only basis upon which they could govern. That is to say, they intended to an alliance with the Fulani using the Hausa language that covered, that trade and conquest had used to cover a very wide area of land, and decided that they will use those big groups. I mean, you have to use Yoruba land. I mean, you have to use Oyo Yoruba, which was the dominant Yoruba, to take over all Yorubas. By the time Awolowo came to power in the 50s, he could not change what the British had done. Even he, who was an Ijebu, was a great facilitator of the Oyo dominance of Yoruba as a language. In the East, the same thing happened, because as all the people from the interaction with the northern ethnic factions, as they poured into Igbo land, their languages started interacting with so much of Igbo land. many of them did not speak classical Igbo as we know it today. But over years of interaction, the languages started resembling themselves, so that by today, in the same way that Oyo Yoruba has literally overtaken much of Yoruba land, that northern Igbo language that started spreading across Igbo land also took over. You can talk about different Igbo. You can talk about different Igbo groups, but